There are literally over 1,000 Claude Code and Cowork videos released on YouTube every single week, but almost none of them give you a setup you can walk away with today that you can actually use for real work. And then as a result, you can ignore the next 3 months of YouTube uploads so that you can actually focus on building. Now, I've literally spent thousands of hours now inside these tools, spoken to hundreds of business owners using them inside real companies, and I'm running my own businesses on them as well. And there are 3 things that I consistently see inside the businesses that are getting most value from Claude. So in less than 15 minutes, you'll either have fixed the setup you've already got, or you'll have built a new one from scratch. And you'll know exactly what matters, so you can stop chasing every single new feature that comes out from Claude. Now, the first one is the one that nobody actually wants to do because it looks and feels like admin, but it's also the one that will add the most amount of value to your workflow with the least amount of effort. So this is going to 10x your setup with just a few minutes of effort. And the general rule I use here, right, is that if you've typed that information into a chat window more than twice, then it should be a file, and that file should be referenced inside your Claude.md. Then inside the desktop app, you just need to make sure that you're actually working from that folder that's got all of those files inside. So let's say it's this folder called the Agentic OS, or our agentic operating system. And this is basically a master folder with this set of contexts. And if you have multiple businesses, then you might spin up multiple folders. Or again, if you have multiple clients, you might have a separate set of contexts for each individual client. So what do you actually put inside that file? So in general, there are 3 files that every business that's using this will have inside their day-to-day setup. And then some of you will have a few more files that you want to actually add to. But these 3 files are consistent across most businesses. And when you distill it, right, all this is just context. It's just specific context that helps improve the quality of your outputs again and again, so that we're not getting that generic output and it actually feels like outputs that us or our team or our colleagues would be producing. And this is all stuff that will be reused every single time. And the first one is brand voice. Now, brand voice is going to play into every single output you produce pretty much. So it's got to sound like you and not like AI slop. There's no point in using AI for your content if it's going to sound generic or going to sound like AI slop. But the point most people miss is that you don't just have a single one-dimensional brand voice. Your brand voice actually tends to vary per platform. So for different platforms like LinkedIn, like if you have a school community, like if you write emails, in all of those different platforms, you'll have a slightly different tone of voice that you use or style. And then you'll also have some inherent rules, which is the voice brief, that will feed into all of those different styles. So the 80-20 way to do this, i.e. spinning up the maximum amount of value in this brand voice document with the least amount of effort, is actually getting Claude to just scrape the posts that you have historically done on each individual platform. And what it's going to do is generate brand voice examples per platform and stick them into one individual file. So we've got this brand context voice profile file, which has our more general core voice DNA and the rules that we use with our brand voice. But you can see that this has got companion docs, or whatever you want to call it, where we've got specific guides for different platforms. So we might have a LinkedIn guide, a school post guide, an email writing guide, all of those different platforms that you write on. You can actually go and get Claude to scrape those platforms and form a specific guide on how you speak in that platform. So you can actually go and scrape those. But also, I'd highly recommend taking a brand voice quiz to determine a more generalized set of rules for your voice and how you actually speak, or how your brand speaks. So I'll leave our brand voice skill down in the description below in a link for free. Just make sure to drop a comment below if you actually end up using it. I want to know how closely this represents your brand voice. So quick recap then, 3 ways to spin this up quickly in order of effort. First is the quiz that I just mentioned. So get Claude to interview you. It's going to ask you 10 to 20 questions about how you talk, what you'd never say, and give you options that help you build out this voice profile. And that is the fastest route from absolutely zero if you've got no voice profile. Then the second is actually to extract specific examples from content you've already written. So scrape your sent mail by connecting Claude up using the MCP to your Google Mail, scrape your LinkedIn posts, scrape your school replies, your client WhatsApps, whatever. It can basically read hundreds of examples of your writing and pull out patterns that will give you a starting point. And like I said, just do that on a per platform basis because you talk differently for different platforms. And then the third part is continuously updating it. So whenever you find yourself making changes to a style, then make sure you actually go and update the initial rule set so you don't have to do that rework again and again. But all that being said, out of the box, Claude has got pretty good at sounding non-generic and non-AI-like, but it will never sound like you unless you give it those great examples of your actual work. So that's brand voice or voice brief. you've got everything now sounding like you, but it also needs to look like you've created it. So this brings us to visual identity. So visual identity is as it sounds. It's your colors, your fonts, your logo, what a slide you produce looks like, what a doc looks like, what a landing page or hero looks like. And basically, once you've written this once, you can apply it to every visual output. So it could be AI generated images or your carousels, anything like that without reprompting it. And this is how the best businesses are making things look consistent, but not exactly the same. So it's going to give variety, but also continuity between content. It's the same reason on our Instagram why we have this variety. We have a set of colors and a set of fonts, but we still have continuity. It looks like one coherent image when you look at the whole lot here. So you can see that we've got this brand context visual identity file. So it's a markdown file with our different visual identity in here. Those are our general rules, but we've also got a visual identity tokens JSON, which basically can input as code the different fonts that we use, the different colors, spacing, header size, etc. And the quickest way I'd recommend setting this up, if you come inside the Claude desktop app, would be to jump down to this design button down here. This will take you to Claude Design. You can click on design systems down here and actually create a design system. So I've got a completely separate video that shows you how to create this design system, but you can basically import slides of things you like, your color schemes, examples of landing pages you like the look of, examples of dashboards. Basically fill this with examples and it will spin up that same design system, which you can then download and put into a file that you then put in that reference folder. It will come with fonts, with colors, with heading sizes, with the way you like to draw boxes. All of that stuff will be defined and put into that document, and it's really easy to spin up inside Claude Design. Now, I've seen other people actually recommending Anthropic's Theme Factory, which is basically a bunch of predefined themes in here, like Botanical Garden. You've got the different color palettes, typography, but you can see how basic these are. They don't include design tokens. They don't include header sizes, etc. And also think about how many other businesses will be actually using these themes if they're publicly available in this theme factory. So instead, if you're actually starting from scratch, I'd recommend jumping to a site like Humint, where you can basically flick through different designs and get a color palette. And then you can also go to font pair and go into pairings to see basically different fonts that are not the standard AI inter font that is always recommended by AI designs. So that's the best place to start from zero if you're starting there today. So now you've got your voice and you've got how things actually look or your visual identity. Now you just need to save common assets that you're constantly going to reuse, like your common links, information around your ideal customer profile, business links to your different YouTube channel, your LinkedIn, your social handles, where your logo is stored, what products you sell. And maybe that information includes scraping actually your website every so often and keeping a log of the information on your website, like the list of products. And this set of business facts, we'll call them, could go as far as projects you have ongoing or customer service documents. But I guess it's the most pertinent information that doesn't change all the time, but you actually have to reuse in the context again and again. So either stick them in something like an assets.md file or actually separate them out, have a separate ICP for your ideal customer profile like we do. If you've got a massive information, I'd highly recommend making it modular and sticking them in separate files. And then your Claude.md, in terms of everything we've covered so far, will just reference those specific files. Say if you need anything visual, go to the visual identity document. If you need to write any content, go to our brand voice. If you need facts, or always load in the assets.md file, always load in the ICP. All of those things, you can use the Claude.md to direct Claude to use them at the right time. And that is basically effective context management. And Anthropic doesn't publish a recommended structure on where to house this information. They don't even tell you to do this in the first place. But you can basically just store that in a local folder and share that across a GitHub if you have a team that needs that same information. And then, like we said, if you're working inside something like the desktop app, all you need to do is actually connect it up to the correct folder so it has access to that information. Now, that's the first part of the setup that makes people successful. Now, this second part is arguably even more important than your static context, because this is the stuff that's going to save you the most time. And there are simple ways to set this up and shortcuts that I'm going to show you. And it kind of brings us on to skills. Now, most people by this point have heard of skills and are probably using skills or Claude skills inside their setup. But if you haven't before, then here's a quick explainer of exactly what they are. So a skill is just a folder with an instruction file that teaches Claude how to do a specific job. That is literally it. So there are certain conventions about how to build skills properly, but the most important one you need to know is that skills work on a system called progressive disclosure, where most of the skill is not injected into Claude's context straight away, and it's only injected when it's needed. So the first thing is you need to make sure the skill is actually going to activate when it's called. You basically need to enable Claude to actually find it by giving it a clear description of when it should activate, when it should not activate, and exactly what we're trying to achieve with that skill. And then once that skill is loaded, it loads the skill.md, which is that separate step-by-step guide of the exact instructions on how to do that specific process. And then separately from that, the step-by-step guide will reference specific context that sits separately in different files. Anything that isn't specific step-by-step instructions is that additional context that only gets loaded in when it's needed. Now, once you understand all of that, lots of business owners are creating skills for their specific processes, right? They're all very independent, individual processes. But there's a cheat code for the businesses who are doing it really well, and that's that they don't create these from scratch every time. They either have adapted Anthropic's own skill creator skill to create skills in that consistent modular format, so they can chain multiple skills together, they can maintain it in one place, they're reusable. So they're using the skill creator skill to basically shortcut the ability to create new skills based on their existing processes. But the even quicker method, and this is a recent release from Anthropic, is to actually just record that step-by-step process directly inside Claude and generate the skill from the actual recording. So this is super powerful because it's actually super quick and can pick up steps, like 60 steps I showed in a previous video, in just 4 minutes of recording. And then it's able to reliably do that process again and again from that point onwards. So it took me 4 minutes to record and actually generate a skill, which was highly complex and you'd have to teach another human how to do several times because they'd make mistakes. So they're not creating skills from scratch. And they are genuinely just showing Claude how to do that skill by recording a skill, and it will create the skill on their behalf, especially for complex processes which involve multiple apps where you need Claude to actually go and access those things. The recorder skill is especially important when you don't have things like APIs which it can interact with. The other common pattern that I noticed is that the businesses that are doing this best are actually just leveraging skills that are already built out. Now, this doesn't mean just going to a skills marketplace where there are thousands of skills to go through. Oh, there are certainly a lot of skills out there. If you go to skills.sh, for example, you can see the all-time installs on these different skills. You can see trending. And of course, there are some brilliant skills out there, but who's going to sit there and search through a million skills when you can just find some tailor-made ones already by Anthropic that you can go in and adapt? So instead, I'd just leverage what Anthropic has already built out, and they built this amazing plugin or set of skills specifically for small businesses. So if you go into the settings inside the desktop app, go to plugins and browse, you can download this small business plugin. And if you click on that, you can see that this has got 31 different skills that you can leverage immediately out of the box. These are all vetted directly by Anthropic. So they're a really good starting point to get up and running for common business tasks. So you've got things like invoice chase, which basically is going to pull everything overdue out of your accounts. It's going to write a chaser email for each one and wait for you to actually say send. So all those invoice chasing you're doing on a Friday afternoon are now just outsourced immediately once you set it up with your specific systems. You've got something like close month, which is your month-end close. It's going to reconcile, flag what doesn't match, tell you what's missing, basically before your accountant is even able to take a look at it. You've got super important skills like margin analyzer, which is going to tell you which jobs and which clients are actually making you money and where you need to strip back in certain areas. And if you hover above any of these, they give a direct description of exactly what they do. So Canva Creator is going to take an approved content brief and execute a campaign end to end by creating Canva designs. So some things you never thought that would be possible are immediately possible if you download and use these skills for small businesses directly from Anthropic. And all you need to do is install that plugin, and all those skills are immediately available then for you to use. And then there are a few other skills that I really wanted to recommend because they were so good and so comprehensive that I just had to recommend them, even though they're not by Anthropic. So the first one is Claude SEO. So I have no affiliation with Claude SEO at all. It's free and open source, but it has 32 different skills. So anything you want to improve to drive you more organic traffic, I'd highly recommend checking out Claude SEO. And it even branches into AI search too. So some examples you can do here is a full site audit, assess your technical SEO, work out whether your content will rank well based on Google's EEAT factors, GEO or AI search. You can do local SEO. So all of these things are comprehensively built into one set of skills that you can then build on. And then if you're not just looking for organic traffic, the same creator, Daniel, has created Claude Ads. And I've not actually tried this one personally, but based on the Claude SEO feedback, I would highly recommend if you're looking at ads to try out this Claude Ads account. So it's 12 different platforms, 33 different skills. Again, can connect to your ads, can audit them, and can actually create the ads on your behalf. So now you're on par with the other businesses that basically got a bunch of skills. They're creating their own skills, but they're also able to actually just take and adapt other people's skills really quickly. But all of this information is basically useless if you're still in that chat window, chatting back and forth. So the third piece of advice that I hear again and again from people who are doing this best is actually setting up workflows so they can just supervise and not have to continuously manually run these processes. So basically pulling ourselves out of the chat window. Now, there are a few ways you can actually do this, but the easiest way, especially in the desktop app, is to actually just figure out scheduled tasks. So inside the desktop app here, you're going to click the scheduled task here. And what we're going to be able to do is basically create with Claude, like we do with everything else, a new scheduled task so that things can run on your behalf, not necessarily even on your computer. It can be done in the cloud whilst you're away from the computer. And you can do this for more tasks than you think. Any task, even if it needs some input or human in the loop input from you at certain stages, can be scheduled to run on a repeatable basis. So let's take a quick look at some of the examples that I use every single week. Firstly, we've got a weekly invoice reconciliation, and it basically connects to my accounting software, looks at all my transactional emails and reconciles the two. It takes the receipts from my emails, converts them to a PDF and uploads them directly in my accounting software, so I don't need to do that monthly invoice reconciliation or weekly invoice reconciliation. We've given it complete ability to run on its defined task with all of the permissions allowed, and it runs in the cloud, so it doesn't rely on me having my laptop actually open at the time. In each of these, you can also go in and see the logs of exactly what happened. So it opens up a separate conversation window where you can see all of the outputs and how it performed in that specific receipt. So you can see that actually attached 17 receipts from the last week. That's 17 receipts that I haven't had to go through and manually reconcile myself or hire an accountant to do so. And then we've got competitor analysis being watched, YouTube transcripts, spend audits. All of those things can be done on a scheduled task, and it stops me having to do that task every single week. It buys me more time back. Now, the biggest unlock that came out recently was, like we mentioned, the ability to run these in the cloud. So now you don't have to have your laptop on. You can literally run them whilst you're not there. So that's so similar now to what we used to have when we built N8N workflows, but we no longer need to actually build the workflow. Claude can build the workflow for us, or it can just watch us do that and turn it into a skill or scheduled task. Now, like with everything, if you want to set these up, all you need to do is go to new tasks and create those with Claude. Claude will interview you. You can tell it which skills we want to use. So say we wanted to use that Claude SEO skill to write daily blog articles, then we would just tell it to go and find that skill on our system, find content or topic that's relevant, and write about that using the defined logic in that skill. So we could literally get it to write a new piece of content every single day, and it would take about 15 minutes to set up and get running, and then we'd refine it over time. Now, the one caveat to running them in the cloud is that you can't give them access to a local folder right now. So if you do want to run these scheduled tasks in the cloud, but you still want them to have access to everything we've created before this section, all that static business context, your brand voice, your visual identity, and then you need to store those on a cloud software like Notion or Google Drive and connect your desktop app up to Notion or Google Drive using an MCP here. So we're not able to just use local files on our computer when our computer's switched off. And the reason this is buying back so much time, one, they don't have to actually monitor these tasks. They just run on demand every single week or every single day, but it's also now connected to mobile and the mobile app. So you get a notification directly sent to your mobile. So gone are the days where company knowledge is retained in people's heads. We can now put all of that into skills, into context files, and then ultimately turn them into repeatable tasks that we just schedule and run again and again. And ultimately, the whole point of this, right, is that we can turn them into those repeatable tasks that we don't have to monitor so that we can focus on higher leverage items. And that is what I see the best business owners, the best businesses actually doing with their Claude Code or Claude Cowork setup today. So if you do want to take this to the next level and add in things like memory, so it stores all of your previous decisions and the logic behind those decisions, or leverage this across multiple team members, then you can check out our Agentic Academy in the description below. It's designed to take you from absolute zero to running practical systems inside of the business that you operate inside. Check that out if you're interested, and see you in the next one.